let's get right into it. Think about a map of the US. Now, zoom way, way down to that little corner of Texas that bumps right up against Mexico. That's El Paso. And according to the source material we're looking at today, this city isn't just an island geographically, it's an island legally. It's a place where the constitutional rules that are supposed to protect you everywhere else, well, they just don't seem to work the same way.
And this quote, it cuts right to the chase. The whole argument here is that the immense pressure of being on the border has created something the author calls the El Paso exception. It's this reality where the rights we all learn about in school, the ones we take for granted, are often bent, ignored, or just plain broken.
So before we dive into how things break down, let's do a quick refresher on how they're supposed to work, right? This is the textbook version of America, the basic rules that are meant to protect every single citizen, no matter if you're in Anchorage, Alaska, or El Paso, Texas.
Okay, so these are the big ones, the bedrock of U.S. law. You've got your separation of powers, the supremacy clause that says federal law is the top dog, and, of course, the Bill of Rights. Now, for what we're talking about today, you've got to keep the Fourth Amendment in your head. That's your protection from the government just searching your stuff for no reason. We all kind of assume these rights are like oxygen. They're just everywhere. But what happens when you walk into a place where the air is a little thinner?
And that's where we get to the El Paso exception. You see, the source argues this isn't just a vibe or a feeling. It's actually baked into legal precedent that literally changes the rules of the game just because of where you are on the map. And it all stems from this one little thing called the border search exception.
This right here, this is the legal justification for the whole thing. The border search exception basically draws a 100-mile-wide, Constitution-light zone around the entire country. And guess what? The entire city of El Paso is inside that zone. That means federal agents have powers here they just wouldn't have in Chicago or Denver.
And this just lays out the difference perfectly. So almost everywhere else in the country, the police need probable cause, like actual concrete facts to search you or your property. But inside that 100-mile zone, the standard drops to reasonable suspicion. It's a much, much lower bar. And the source argues this legal loophole doesn't just stay at the official checkpoints. It bleeds into the whole culture of law enforcement in the city, creating a power vacuum where the official rulebook gets tossed aside.
So what happens when the rule of law starts to fade? Well, according to the source, you get a mosh pit of different authorities all vying for control. The author uses this really powerful analogy, calling El Paso a city of competing fiefdoms, like in medieval times. All these separate little kingdoms operating by their own rules, with regular people just stuck in the middle.
And the source breaks down these rival powers pretty clearly. You've got the El Paso police running the streets, then you have Customs and Border Protection, CPP. They control the border itself. Inside the prisons, it's the Barrio Azteca gang that calls the shots, and just across the river, the cartels run Mexico and, crucially, the entire supply chain.
Now, this is where it gets really scary for an individual. The source points to something called the dual sovereignty doctrine. You know how the Fifth Amendment is supposed to protect you from being tried for the same crime twice? That's double jeopardy. While because Texas and the U.S. government are considered separate sovereigns, they can both take a crack at you for the exact same crime. It's like a legal cheat code for prosecutors. If they lose the first time, they just get a do-over.
And this feeling of being powerless, the source argues, goes all the way down to a simple interaction on the street. The author even talks about their own experience of being physically beaten by police without resisting at all. They describe it not as a legal arrest, but as an on-the-spot penalty, where a single officer gets to be the judge, the jury, and the guy who carries out the sentence.
And look, this isn't just one person's story. The source points to this long, documented history of problems within the system. We're talking about everything from an internal affairs sting back in 2003 that was set up to catch whistleblowers, all the way to 2021 when nearly 2/3 of the police accountability reports just vanished. The claim is that this isn't about a few bad apples. It's a deep-seated culture of impunity.
So you take that culture of control, and then you pour gasoline on it with technology. The source calls El Paso a digital panopticon. Now, a panopticon was this idea for a prison where a single guard could see every inmate, but the inmates never knew if they were actually being watched. And what's the effect? You start policing yourself, because you have to act like you're always being watched.
And here's the arsenal that makes it all happen. You've got automated drones that launch themselves from docks all over the city. You have Stingray devices that can trick your phone and track your location. A massive network of license plate readers watching every car, even microphones listening for gunshots. And the real kicker, according to the source, the cartels are often using the exact same kind of tech.
And just look at what happens when you combine that tech with the border search exception. Warrantless searches of people's phones and laptops by CBP have just exploded. They went from around 10,000 back in 2015 to over 46,000 in just a few years. That is a staggering erosion of digital privacy happening on a massive scale.
So all of this raises a massive question, right? With all this power, all this tech, all this funding, why isn't the drug problem getting any better? Why does the hamster wheel just keep on spinning? The source offers a pretty cynical answer, and it comes down to one word: money.
See, the reality of fentanyl changes the entire equation. The source literally calls big drug busts show trials. And why? Because the chemicals to make it, the precursors, create what it calls an industrial tsunami of supply. You could fit enough fentanyl to kill every person in El Paso inside a suitcase. Seizing a truck here and there, it doesn't even make a ripple.
And that leads to the source's most provocative conclusion. The system isn't actually broken. For the people who benefit from it, it's working perfectly. Federal funding, bigger agency budgets, all that overtime pay for officers, lucrative contracts for surveillance tech, all of it depends on the problem never going away. According to the source, for these fiefdoms, failure is profitable.
Okay, but the source doesn't just leave us in despair. It actually proposes a pretty radical solution, a way to bring in an outside force with real power to hold everyone accountable. The idea is for something called a Democracy Protection Agency. The easiest way to think about it is like an IRS for civil rights. This independent agency would have the power to audit anybody, police, courts, city hall, without needing their permission. And the best part? It would have real teeth. If it finds corruption, it can freeze their federal funding, hit him right where it hurts, the wallet.
And the logic behind this is just beautifully simple. The source takes that old argument, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear, and flips it right back on the authorities. Because, hey, for an honest police department, a yearly audit should be no big deal, right? Just a bunch of boring paperwork.
And the source material leaves us with this final thought. For most people driving through El Paso, everything looks fine, totally hunky-dory. But for those on the fringe, the people who actually have to deal with the system on a daily basis, they know the real rules are different. And the warning here is that the line between those two worlds is way, way thinner than you think. Anyone is just one bad traffic stop, just one reasonable suspicion away from finding out for themselves.
And that brings us to the final, haunting question that this source material forces us to ask. When you look at all the money, power, and technology poured into the drug war, is its constant failure an unfortunate bug in the system? Or is it a feature? A deliberately designed system meant to keep the money flowing and the powerful in charge. It really makes you wonder if what's happening in El Paso is truly an exception, or if it's just a preview of what's coming for the rest of the country.